Captain Do-Yun stood on the bridge of his ship and looked at the screens in front of him. His hands gripped the edge of the control panel so hard that his knuckles turned white. Around him, his crew worked quietly. Everyone knew they were in serious trouble. Outside the windows, 18 enemy warships surrounded them. Their weapons were charging up and glowing red in the darkness of space. The enemy ships belonged to a species called the Vexrans. These aliens were like giant insects. They stood 3 meters tall and had hard shells covering their bodies. These shells could stop most weapons. The Vexrans controlled 40 star systems, and everyone in the galaxy was afraid of them. They used fear and violence to get what they wanted. When humans first came to space and met other aliens, the Vexrans laughed at them. They thought humans were weak and unimportant. Minho was the communications officer. He sat at his station and turned to face the captain. His voice was calm even though he was scared inside. He said that the Vexran commander was sending another message. The message was simple. Surrender the ship and become prisoners, or refuse and die in 3 minutes. Those were the only choices. Do-Hyun thought about how they got into this mess. His ship was called the Indomitable. It was not a warship. It was a survey vessel full of scientists and researchers. They had been exploring empty space near the edge of the galaxy. They were making maps and studying planets that nobody owned. But the Vexrans showed up and said this area belonged to them. According to galactic law, they were lying. This space did not belong to anyone. But the Vexrans did not care about laws. They had guns, and they thought that was all that mattered. Ji-Won was the navigation officer. She was working hard at her computer, trying to find a way out. She looked up at the captain with sad eyes. She told him that she had checked every possibility. There was no escape. The ship was too slow to run away. Their weapons were too weak to fight 18 warships. The enemy had them trapped completely. From the engine room, the chief engineer Soman spoke through the intercom. Her voice crackled with static. She said that even if they pushed the engines until they exploded, they might destroy 4 enemy ships before dying, but that would kill everyone on board. The crew deserved better than a suicide mission. Do-Hyun closed his eyes for a moment. He thought about the 147 people on his ship. They were not soldiers. They were scientists, engineers, doctors, and teachers. Some had brought their families along. All of them had believed that space was safe. The Galactic Council had promised to protect everyone, but that promise was a lie. Nobody was coming to help them. For 6 months, the Vexrans had been getting worse and worse. They destroyed human settlements on small planets. They captured human cargo ships and stole everything inside. They even kidnapped human diplomats. Every time this happened, humanity asked the Galactic Council for help. The Council said they would fix the problem. They said they would talk to the Vexrans and make them stop, but nothing ever changed. The old alien species on the Council thought humans were newcomers who did not matter. They did not care if humans got hurt. The main screen flickered and showed the face of the Vexran commander. He was huge and ugly. His mouth parts moved in a way that looked like he was laughing at them. The computer translated his words into human language. He said that time was running out. Would the humans surrender or would they die? He said humans were young and stupid. They did not understand how the galaxy really worked. Do-Hyun thought about Earth. He thought about the blue oceans and green forests. He thought about how humans had almost destroyed themselves with wars and nuclear weapons. Humanity had fought and killed each other for thousands of years. Finally, they decided to stop fighting and work together. When they reached the stars, they promised themselves they would be peaceful. They would not be violent anymore. But maybe the other aliens saw that peace as weakness. Maybe they thought humans were easy targets because humans did not want to fight. Hyunwoo was the weapons officer. He sat quietly at his station with his hand over the firing controls. He asked the captain for orders. His voice was soft, but everyone heard him. The bridge went completely silent. Everyone was waiting to see what their captain would do. Do-Hyun opened his eyes and looked at his crew. He saw fear on their faces, but he also saw courage. They trusted him. They would follow whatever decision he made. He took a deep breath and opened the communication channel back to the Vexran commander. When Do-Hyun spoke, his voice was calm and steady. He said that he wanted the Vexran commander to understand something important. Humans came to space in peace. They followed every law. They respected every boundary. They tried to be good neighbors. But the Vexrans had pushed them too far. The Vexran commander looked confused. His insect face twitched. He asked what the human was talking about. Do-Hyun's face changed. His expression became hard and cold. He looked like a different person. He said that the Vexrans should have studied human history more carefully. They should have learned about where humans came from and what humans could do. Because the Vexrans had just reminded humanity why they were so good at war. He turned to his crew and started giving orders quickly. He told Minho to send a secret message to Earth. The message had a special code that meant war had begun. He told Somin to push the engines to maximum power even if they broke afterward. He told Jiwon to fly the ship straight at the enemy formation. He wanted to get close enough to touch them. He told Hyunwoo to target the biggest enemy ships and fire everything when he gave the signal. The Vexran commander started to look angry. He said that humans could not win. This was suicide. The humans were going to die. Do-hyun smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had accepted death and decided to make it count. He said that maybe they would die, but they would make sure the Vexrans remembered this day. And more importantly, the entire galaxy would remember that humans do not surrender. Humans do not give up. If you push them into a corner, they fight back with everything they have. The screen went black. The Vexran had cut off the communication. Alarm bells started ringing all over the ship. The enemy ships were getting ready to fire their weapons. Red lights flashed on every console. The crew worked fast, preparing for battle. Do-hyun stood up straight and looked out at the enemy fleet. His mind was clear. His decision was made. He spoke to everyone on the ship through the intercom. His voice went to every room and every hallway. He told all hands to get ready for combat. Today they would teach the galaxy a lesson. Today they would show everyone that you do not push humanity too far and live to tell about it. Today they would prove that even when humans are outnumbered and outgunned, they will never stop fighting for what is right. The ship's engines roared to life. The Indomitable turned and flew straight at the enemy ships. All of its weapons started firing. Missiles streaked through space. Energy beams cut through the darkness. The human ship was like a wounded animal attacking the predators that cornered it. The Vexarans would soon learn something that every predator on Earth had learned throughout history. When you corner your prey and give them no choice, they stop being prey. They become the most dangerous thing in the universe. They become something that has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for, and humanity had just remembered that lesson. Part 2. 3 days passed after the Indomitable sent its last message. Then the entire Galactic Council held an emergency meeting. The council chamber was on a planet called Nexus Prime. This was the most important political place in the galaxy. Representatives from 47 different alien species came to the meeting. Everyone was talking nervously. The huge room buzzed with worried voices. Ambassador Yoonji stood in the human section of the chamber. She was alone. Her face looked calm, but inside she felt many emotions. She had worked as a diplomat for 20 years. She always told people to be patient and peaceful. She always said humans should try to get along with everyone. Now she stood there wondering if patience had been a mistake. Maybe being nice just made other aliens think humans were weak. The council chair called the meeting to order. He was from an old species called the Torvans. His people had created the Galactic Council 5,000 years ago. He had 6 eyes and they all looked at Yoonji. He seemed sad about what had happened. He said they had received reports about a violent incident in the Kaloran expanse. The Vexran delegation claimed that the human ship attacked them for no reason. The Vexrans wanted money for damages, and they wanted all human ships to leave the area immediately. Yoonji remained standing. Her voice was clear and strong. She said the Vexran claims were lies. She wanted to show the council the complete sensor recordings and communication records from the Indomitable. The ship had sent this data to Earth right before the battle started. A big holographic screen appeared in the center of the chamber. Everyone watched the recording in silence. They saw how the Vexran fleet surrounded the human ship. They heard the Vexran ultimatum demanding surrender. They watched Captain Do-hyun try to reason with the enemy commander. They saw how desperate the situation was. The human ship had no way to escape and no chance to win. When the recording ended, many of the alien species looked uncomfortable. Some shifted in their seats. Others whispered to each other. The evidence was clear. The Indomitable had been defending itself. The Vexrans had attacked first in space that did not belong to them. The Vexran delegate stood up. His name was Thorax, and he was a huge warrior. His hard shell reflected the lights in the chamber. He said the recording changed nothing. The humans destroyed 4 Vexran warships and damaged 6 more before the human ship was eliminated. He said humans were violent and primitive. They were dangerous to everyone in the galaxy. The Council must punish humanity immediately. Yunji's eyes flashed with anger, but her voice stayed controlled. She repeated what Thorax had said. 4 warships destroyed, against 18, by a single survey vessel filled with scientists. She paused to let everyone think about that. Then she said that maybe the real question was not about human violence. Maybe the question was about Vexron incompetence. How could they lose so badly against one small ship? The chamber erupted with noise. Many aliens started talking at once. Some looked shocked that a human had spoken so directly. Humans usually were polite and careful in council meetings. This was different. Thorax's mouth parts clicked together angrily. He asked if Yunji dared to mock the Vexron military. His voice got louder. Maybe the Vexrons should demonstrate their competence by attacking the human homeworld. Maybe they should destroy Earth and show humans their place. The chamber exploded into chaos. Everyone started shouting. The council chair banged his gavel over and over, trying to restore order. It took several minutes before the room got quiet again. Yunji stood perfectly still during all the shouting. She waited for silence. When the room finally went quiet, she spoke again. Her tone was different now. It carried a weight that made even the oldest alien species pay attention. She said that threatening Earth was perhaps the single worst mistake Thorax could make. She recommended that he take back that statement immediately. Thorax laughed. It was a harsh clicking sound that echoed in the chamber. He asked why the Vexrans should fear humans. Humans were soft and weak. They had only been in space for 50 years. The Vexrans had conquered civilizations older than human recorded history. Yunji reached into her diplomatic case. She pulled out a small data chip and held it up for everyone to see. She said this chip contained humanity's complete military history. Every war, every conflict, every weapon humans had ever designed. Earth Command had authorized her to share this information with the Council. She wanted everyone to understand exactly what they were dealing with. She inserted the chip into the Council's computer system. The displays around the chamber filled with images. Ancient humans fighting with swords and spears. Medieval castles under siege with catapults throwing stones. Napoleonic soldiers with muskets and cannons. The horrific mechanized warfare of the world wars with tanks and machine guns. Nuclear explosions that could destroy entire cities. Modern precision weapons that could strike targets from halfway around a planet. Century after century of human conflict played out before the Council. The numbers were staggering. Over 160 million humans died in wars during just the 20th century alone. Humans had invented weapons that could sterilize continents. They had developed strategies refined through 10,000 years of almost constant warfare. The chamber fell completely silent as the presentation ended. Many of the alien species looked shocked. Some appeared sick. The galaxy had been at peace for nearly 3,000 years. The Galactic Council enforced that peace. Most species had not fought a real war in living memory. They had forgotten what war actually meant. Yunji's voice cut through the silence. She said that humans came to the stars trying to escape that violent history. They wanted to be better. They wanted to join the galactic community as partners in peace. But everyone needed to understand something. Humans knew war. They were very, very good at it. They had spent the last 50 years wondering if they would ever need those skills again. She turned to face Thorax directly. She told him that the Vexran species had never faced an enemy like humanity. Humans did not have hard exoskeletons. They did not have superior alien technology. What humans had was 10,000 years of learning how to kill things that were bigger, stronger, and better armed than they were. Humans had cultural memory of fighting for survival against impossible odds. And now, thanks to Vexran actions in the Caloran expanse, they had reminded humans of exactly what humans were capable of doing. The council chair leaned forward. His expression was grave and serious. He asked what humanity's response to this incident would be. Yunji pulled out a sealed document. It had the official insignia of Earth's unified government on it. Her hands were steady as she broke the seal and read aloud. The Earth Assembly had voted unanimously on this declaration. All of humanity supported it. She read that any attack on human vessels or installations would be considered an act of war. Any species that engaged in such attacks would face the full military response of humanity. Humans would no longer rely on the Galactic Council for protection, because the Council had proven unable or unwilling to prevent aggression against human people. Furthermore, humanity was withdrawing from all non-essential Council activities. They would keep their embassy open, but that was all. The declaration ended with a warning. Push humanity too far and everyone would discover why humans clawed their way to the top of Earth's food chain. Everyone would learn why humans became the dominant species on their planet. The chamber exploded into chaos again. Aliens shouted at each other. Some demanded action against humanity. Others called for calm. The council chair banged his gavel frantically. But Yunji was already walking toward the exit. She was done talking. As she reached the doorway, she paused and looked back one last time. She said that 147 souls were aboard the Indomitable. They were scientists, explorers, and dreamers. They represented the best of humanity's peaceful hopes. Vexran actions destroyed them and proved that peace through restraint did not work in this galaxy. So now the galaxy would face the humanity that conquered Earth, the humanity that survived ice ages and plagues and wars, the humanity that refused to give up no matter what. She suggested everyone prepare accordingly. She left the chamber. Behind her, the galactic order that had existed for 3,000 years began to crack and break apart. Nothing would ever be the same again. Part 3. 6 months passed since the Indomitable incident. Admiral Taeyong stood on the bridge of his warship called the Retribution. This ship was the flagship of humanity's new strategic response fleet. Around his ship, 147 warships hung in perfect formation. There was one ship for each soul lost on the Indomitable. They waited at the edge of Vexran-controlled space. These ships were unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Each vessel was covered with weapons. Humanity had hoped never to use these weapons in space. There were railguns that could punch through any known armor. There were missile pods carrying warheads that made nuclear weapons look gentle. There were electronic warfare systems designed to cripple enemy computers. There were point defense networks that could shoot down incoming fire before it hit. But the real advantage was not the technology. It was the mindset. Humans thought about war differently than other species did. Commander Yuna was the fleet's tactical coordinator. She had studied every major human conflict in history. She read about ancient Chinese military philosophy. She studied medieval European warfare. She analyzed modern orbital combat. The Vexrans fought with overwhelming force and direct attacks. That strategy had worked for them for centuries. But humanity would fight differently. Dongwu was the communications officer. He turned to the admiral and said the Vexrans were sending a message. They demanded that the human fleet leave their space immediately or face destruction. Admiral Taeyong smiled grimly. He told Dongwu to put the message through. The Vexran High Commander appeared on the main screen. He was huge and his exoskeleton was covered with medals from many battles. Behind him, the bridge of the massive Vexran dreadnought was visible. That ship was easily twice the size of the Retribution. The High Commander said that the human admiral was violating Vexran territory. The Vexrans had assembled a fleet of 300 warships. The humans were outnumbered more than 2 to 1. If the humans retreated now, the Vexrans would spare their lives. But if humans attacked, the Vexrans would crush them just like they crushed the pathetic Indomitable. Taeyong's expression did not change. He spoke calmly. He said that 6 months ago, Vexran forces destroyed the Indomitable and murdered 147 human beings who were engaged in peaceful exploration. The Vexrans refused all demands for justice. They rejected mediation. They had essentially declared war on humanity. The Vexran clicked his mandibles dismissively. He said humans were weak. Humans talked about war but knew nothing about it. The Vexrans had conquered 40 star systems. They were warriors bred for combat. Humans were soft creatures who had barely spent 1 generation in space. Taeyong leaned forward slightly. He said he wanted to share something important. On Earth, there was an ancient philosophy about warfare. It said that if you know your enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. The Vexran mistake was assuming they knew humanity. They saw human restraint and mistook it for weakness. They saw human peace and assumed humans had forgotten war. But humans had not forgotten anything. Every human child learned about terrible battles in history. They learned about the Somme where millions died in trenches. They learned about Stalingrad where an entire city became a battlefield. They learned about Hiroshima where nuclear fire consumed everything. Humans knew what total war looked like because they had lived it. They knew what it meant to fight not for conquest but for survival. The High Commander's mandibles twitched. He said the human should retreat or die. This was the final warning. Taeyong nodded to Commander Yuna. She activated a program that had been running in the background during the entire conversation. Across the Vexron fleet, every computer system suddenly went dark. Every sensor array stopped working. Every communication network failed. The most sophisticated cyber warfare attack ever launched ripped through their systems in seconds. On the screen, the High Commander's expression changed from confidence to confusion to horror. His bridge descended into chaos behind him. Lights flickered. Screens went black. Officers shouted in panic. The High Commander roared. He demanded to know what humans had done. Taeyong's voice was cold now. He said that humans learned something from Earth's history. The best battle is the one you win before it starts. Vexran weapons were offline. Their shields were failing. Their navigation was compromised. 300 warships and every single one was now a floating metal coffin. But he was not there to destroy the fleet. He was there to deliver a message. Humanity tried peace. The Vexrons responded with violence. So now everyone would see what happens when humans stop playing nice. He gestured to Yuna. She transmitted a set of coordinates to the Vexron ships. Their systems were allowed to work just enough to receive this data. Those coordinates marked every Vexron military installation, supply depot, and command center in this sector. Human intelligence had identified them all over the past 3 months. In 72 hours, unless the Vexrans agreed to human terms, humanity would systematically eliminate every single target. But that was not the interesting part. The interesting part was that humans would do it without ever engaging the Vexron fleet in traditional combat. Humans did not need to fight them directly. They had already won. The High Commander's mandibles trembled with rage. He said this was dishonorable. It was cowardly. Humans were attacking with tricks and deception. Taeyong's eyes went hard. He asked if the High Commander dared speak of honor. The Vexrons killed 147 civilians who were surveying empty space. They ambushed a science vessel with 18 warships, and now they dared talk about honor? He said that the Vexrons did not get to define the rules anymore. Humanity had returned to war, and humans were very good at it. This was what happened when you pushed humans too far. Behind the High Commander, the Vexron fleet hung helpless in space. Their mighty warships had been reduced to floating junk by an enemy they had dismissed as primitive and weak. Taeyong continued speaking. His voice carried across every remaining functional communication system in the Vexron fleet. Here were humanity's terms: full reparations for the Indomitable and its crew, withdrawal from all disputed territories, a formal treaty recognizing human sovereignty, and most importantly, the Vexrons would broadcast what happened here today to every species in the galaxy, because humans wanted everyone to know the truth. Humanity tried peace. They offered restraint. They showed mercy. But when you pushed them too far, when you forced them to remember what they were and what they were capable of, then the universe itself should be afraid. The transmission ended. The screen went black. The High Commander stared at nothing. His 300 warships drifted helpless around him. And a horrible realization dawned on him. The Vexrons had awakened something the galaxy had never seen before. An entire species that had learned the art of war through 10,000 years of nearly constant practice. A species that had refined killing into a science. A species that knew 100 different ways to defeat an enemy without firing a single shot. And that species had finally decided to use all that knowledge again. The Vexrons had pushed humanity too far. Now they would pay the price. And every species in the galaxy would learn the same lesson. Never corner a human. Never threaten their families. Never push them beyond the breaking point. Because when humans say you have pushed them too far, it means something very specific. It means the gloves are coming off. It means the restraint is gone. It means they are remembering 10,000 years of warfare and bringing all of that terrible knowledge to bear against you. The Vexrons learned this lesson the hard way. Soon the rest of the galaxy would learn it too. Part 4, 3 months after the incident at Vexron Space, the entire galaxy was talking about humanity. But the tone had changed completely. Aliens no longer spoke about humans in dismissive ways. Now there was a mixture of fear, respect, and fascination in their voices. Dr. Hana sat in a busy cantina on Meridian Station. This was a major trade hub where many species came to do business. Hana was a xenoanthropologist. That meant she studied alien cultures. Over the past few weeks, she had made it her habit to listen to conversations around her. She wanted to document how other species viewed humanity's dramatic change in behavior. At the next table, a group of Keltharian merchants talked in hushed tones. Their crystalline bodies refracted the station lights into rainbow patterns. One of them said that the Vexrans had agreed to every human demand. Every single one. The High Commander had been stripped of his rank for losing an entire fleet without firing a single shot. Another merchant said that humans could hack into any computer system. Their cyber warfare capabilities were centuries ahead of anything anyone else had. A third merchant leaned in and whispered that humans had weapons nobody had imagined, things that could destroy entire planets. Hana smiled slightly as she listened. Some of the rumors were true, others were wild exaggerations, but she noticed something important. Nobody was dismissing humanity anymore. Nobody was laughing at humans or calling them weak. Her communicator chimed. It was a message from Ambassador Yunji requesting an immediate meeting at the human embassy. Hana finished her drink and made her way through the crowded station corridors. The human embassy had changed dramatically. What had once been a modest office was now a fortified compound. Military personnel worked alongside diplomats. Marines in powered armor stood guard at every entrance. The message was clear. Humans were not taking any chances anymore. Ambassador Yunji greeted Hana in her private office. She looked tired but determined. She said she needed Hana's expertise. Dozens of alien species were sending diplomatic messages to humanity. Yunji needed to understand the cultural implications of what humans had done. Hana settled into a chair and pulled out her research notes. She explained that the galaxy was experiencing collective shock. Most species here had lived under something called the Pax Galactica for millennia. That meant galactic peace. They had forgotten what real warfare looked like. When conflicts happened, they were ritualized and limited. Genocide was an ancient memory for them. But for humans, genocide was something that happened in living history. When humanity demonstrated its capabilities against the Vexrans, they did not just defeat a military force. They shattered a fundamental assumption about how the galaxy worked. Humans had introduced fear back into galactic politics. Yunji leaned back in her chair. She asked if that was necessarily bad. The Galactic Council had failed to protect humans. Maybe fear was what was needed to prevent future aggression. Before Hana could respond, there was a knock on the door. Security Officer Junho entered. His expression was grim. He said they had a situation. A delegation from the Thylox Consortium had requested an emergency meeting. They said it was a matter of survival. The Thylox were a minor species. They controlled only 3 star systems on the galactic rim. They had always been neutral and peaceful. They focused on art and philosophy rather than military power. Yunji told Junho to send them in. The Thylox delegation consisted of 3 beings. They had feathers and moved with characteristic grace. Their spokesperson was called Elder Whisperwind. He bowed deeply before speaking. He said they came seeking humanity's protection. For the past decade, the Krill Empire had been encroaching on Thylox territory. They took resources. They enslaved Thylox people. The Thylox appealed to the Galactic Council repeatedly, but the Council said the matter was too minor to warrant intervention. But now, having seen what humanity did to the Vexrans, the Thylox believed humans might help where others would not. They were willing to offer economic partnerships and strategic alliances. They would give humanity anything required. They simply could not survive another year of Krill aggression. Yunji glanced at Hana, who gave a slight nod. The Thylox were genuine, and their plight was real. Yunji said that humanity was not interested in becoming the galaxy's military for hire. However, humans were interested in justice and protecting those who could not protect themselves. That was what humans tried to be before the Indomitable incident. She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the bustling station. She said that what happened with the Vexrans was not about conquest or dominance. It was about sending a message that humanity would not tolerate being attacked. But if humans were going to embrace their military capabilities, then they should use them for the principles they originally brought to the stars. She turned back to the Thylox delegation. She said she would need to consult with Earth Command. but she believed humanity would be willing to extend protection to species facing genuine aggression, not through military occupation, but through mutual defense treaties. Humans would teach species how to defend themselves. They would provide military support when necessary. In return, those species would become part of a coalition who refused to be bullied by the strong. Elder Whisperwind's eyes brightened with hope. That would be more than they dared hope for. The Thylocs would be honored to join such a coalition. After the delegation left, Hana looked at Yunji with a mixture of concern and admiration. She said that Yunji was proposing to reshape galactic politics entirely. A coalition of weaker species backed by human military power, standing against the traditional empires. Yunji nodded slowly. The old order had failed. The Galactic Council could not, or would not, protect peaceful species from aggression. They let the Vexerons bully humans because humans were new and weak. Well, humans were not weak anymore. And if showing their strength meant other species finally had a defender, then maybe the Indomitable's sacrifice was not in vain. Over the following weeks, the pattern repeated itself. Species after species approached humanity. They sought protection, alliance, or simply friendship with the one civilization that had proven capable of standing up to the galactic bullies. The Galactic Council watched with growing alarm. Humanity's influence was spreading not through conquest, but through mutual defense. The old empires who had been comfortable in their dominance suddenly found themselves facing a coalition they could not intimidate. Small species who had been victims for centuries were joining together under human protection. They were learning human defensive tactics. They were building ships with human weapons, and most importantly, they were standing up to their oppressors for the first time. The Norax joined the coalition after the Vexerons tried to seize their mining colonies. The Silith joined after pirates destroyed their trade convoys. The Viridians joined after seeing how humans treated their allies with respect rather than domination. Each new member strengthened the coalition. Each alliance sent a message to the old empires. The galaxy was changing. The days when the strong could do whatever they wanted were ending. And throughout all of this, one phrase echoed across the galaxy. It was whispered in 100 languages. It was spoken in bars and council chambers and military briefings. It was a warning that every species now understood. Never push humanity too far, because when you did, you discovered something terrifying. You discovered a species that had survived every disaster Earth could throw at them. You discovered a species that had learned warfare from 10,000 years of practice. You discovered a species that would protect its friends and destroy its enemies with equal efficiency. The galaxy was learning this lesson. Some learned it peacefully by becoming allies. Others would learn it the hard way like the Vexrans did, but everyone would learn it eventually. Humanity had arrived in space hoping for peace. When that hope was destroyed, they brought war. And nobody wanted to face human war twice. Part 5 years after the Indomitable incident, Lieutenant Jiho stood on the observation deck of Unity Station. This was humanity's newest and largest space installation. Around him, the stars gleamed with a different meaning than they had when his father gazed at them years ago. Unity Station hung in neutral space between Earth and the Galactic Council chambers. It served as headquarters for what was now called the Mutual Defense Alliance. This was a coalition of 47 species united under a simple principle. No species should have to face aggression alone. Jiho had been 15 when his father, Captain Dohyun, died aboard the Indomitable. He remembered the memorial service clearly. There was a flag-draped casket that held only personal effects because no bodies were recovered. There were solemn words about sacrifice and duty. Jiho joined the military the day he turned 18. He was determined to honor his father's memory. Now at 23, he served as a liaison officer. He worked with allied species to coordinate defense strategies and share human military knowledge. It was delicate work. It required both tactical expertise and cultural sensitivity. Commander Soyeon approached him with a datapad. She was the station's chief of operations. She said they had the latest intelligence reports from the border regions. The Krill Empire was mobilizing forces near Thyloc space again. Jiho took the datapad and scanned the information quickly. The Krill had been testing the Alliance's resolve for years. They kept probing for weaknesses. They wanted to know if humanity would actually fight for their smaller allies. He asked how many ships the Krill had. Soyon said 50 warships, including 3 heavy dreadnoughts. The Krill claimed it was just military exercises, but the Thylocs were rightfully nervous. Jiho asked about the current Thylocs defenses. Soyon explained that humans had been training Thylocs defense forces for 3 years. They now had 20 modern ships equipped with human weapons and tactics. It was not enough to stop 50 Krill vessels in a direct fight, but it was enough to make any invasion very costly. Jiho asked about the human rapid response fleet. Soyon said it was ready to deploy within 6 hours. Admiral Taeyong had made it clear that any attack on an Alliance member would be met with immediate and overwhelming force. Jiho smiled slightly. Admiral Taeyong was the hero of the Vexron confrontation. He had become humanity's face of military deterrence. His reputation alone had prevented more conflicts than anyone could count. Jiho said he thought the Krill were testing them. They wanted to see if humans would actually fight for the Thylocs, or if human protection was just empty promises. Soyon nodded. That was what the Alliance Council thought too. They had called an emergency session to determine their response. The Alliance Council chamber was impressive. Unlike the traditional Galactic Council, where species were seated according to their power, the Alliance chamber was circular. Every species had equal representation. At the center stood a holographic display showing real-time data from across Alliance space. Ambassador Yunji called the session to order. She now served as humanity's chief representative to the Alliance. She had aged in the past 5 years, but her eyes still held the same determination that had challenged the Vexrans. She said that everyone had received the intelligence reports about Krill movements near Thyloc space. She asked Elder Whisperwind if he wanted to address the council. The elderly Thyloc's leader stood. His feathers showed the gray of advanced age. He had been instrumental in bringing his people into the Alliance. He had become one of humanity's strongest advocates. He said that the Krill Empire sought to intimidate them. They wanted to make the Thylocs doubt the Alliance's commitment, but he did not doubt. He remembered when his people were alone and helpless against aggression. Now they stood as part of something greater. He trusted that humanity and fellow Alliance members would honor their mutual defense treaty. A delegate from the Keltharian Collective spoke next. Their crystalline forms shimmered with reflected light. The Kelthar stood with the Thylocs. They too had benefited from Alliance protection. Their trade routes, once plagued by pirates, were now secure. They would contribute ships to defend their allies. One by one, other species pledged support. The Norax, the Silith, the Viridians all spoke of their commitment to mutual defense. It was powerful to see. Many of these species had historically been rivals or had never interacted at all. Now they stood together. Yunji waited until everyone had spoken before standing. She said that 5 years ago humanity learned a painful lesson. They learned that peace through weakness did not work. Restraint without strength was just vulnerability. But humans also made a promise. They would use their strength to protect, not to conquer. To defend, not to dominate. The Krill Empire was testing that promise. They wanted to see if the Alliance was merely words or if everyone truly stood together. Her answer was simple. They stood together, not because humanity commanded it, but because that was what allies did. She activated the holographic display showing Alliance forces. She proposed they send a joint fleet to Thyloc space, not to attack, but to demonstrate that Alliance borders were defended by all Alliance members. Human ships, Keltharian vessels, Norax cruisers, all united. Let the Krill see that they did not face one species, but 47. The vote was unanimous. 2 days later, Lieutenant Jiho stood on the bridge of a ship called the Guardian. It was part of a fleet of 150 ships representing 20 different Alliance species. They emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of Thyloc space, directly facing the Krill Armada. The contrast was striking. The Krill fleet was purely military. Their ships were designed for intimidation and assault. The Alliance fleet was diverse. Ships of different designs and capabilities worked in coordinated formation. It was a visible representation of unified purpose. Admiral Taeyong, commanding from the Retribution, opened a channel to the Krill Admiral. He said that Krill vessels were approaching Alliance territory. He asked them to state their intentions. The Krill Admiral appeared on screen. He was a hulking reptilian figure. His expression showed barely concealed surprise. He said they were conducting military exercises in open space. The Alliance had no authority there. Taeyong's voice remained calm. He said the Alliance had every authority to defend its members. These were not open spaces. They bordered Thylox territory. Under the Mutual Defense Treaty, any aggressive action would be met with collective response. The Krill Admiral's eyes narrowed. He asked if humans would go to war over these pathetic feather creatures. The Thylox were nothing. This alliance was nothing. Humans were playing at politics. Taeyong leaned forward. When he spoke, his words carried absolute conviction. He said that the Thylox were allies. An attack on them was an attack on humanity and every species in this fleet. Humans took their commitment seriously. He suggested the Krill ask the Vexrans if they doubted this. The Krill had two options: withdraw the fleet and petition the Alliance for peaceful negotiations about border concerns, or continue their current course and discover exactly why every species runs when a human says they have been pushed too far. For a long moment, the Krill Admiral stared at the diverse fleet arrayed against him. 50 Krill warships against 150 Alliance vessels. The math was simple. But more than that, the unity was undeniable. This was not a bluff. This was a real alliance ready to fight. Slowly, the Krill fleet began to turn away. On the Guardian's bridge, Jiho allowed himself a small smile. His father had died to teach the galaxy that humanity would not be pushed around. Now that lesson had evolved into something greater, a coalition of species who refused to be bullied by anyone. Commander Soyeon stood beside him, watching the Krill retreat. She said quietly that his father would be proud. Jiho nodded. He thought of the 147 souls lost on the Indomitable. Their sacrifice had changed everything. The galaxy was different now. 5 years ago, the strong could do whatever they wanted to the weak. But his father and crew showed that humanity would not accept that. And from that defiance, they built something better. Not human dominance, but genuine alliance. Protection for those who needed it. Justice for those who deserved it. He looked at the diverse fleet around them. Ships from species that had never trusted each other before humanity brought them together. The old empires thought they could push humanity too far. They were wrong. But more importantly, they taught humans that strength could be used for something greater than revenge. Humans could build a galaxy where no species had to face aggression alone. As the Alliance fleet began its victory formation, a message went out across all channels. It was translated into every language in the known galaxy. The Mutual Defense Alliance stood ready to welcome any species seeking protection from aggression. They would not conquer. They would not dominate. But they would defend. Because that was what happened when you reminded humanity why they learned to fight. They used that knowledge to protect those who could not protect themselves. Push them too far and they would show you what 10,000 years of warfare taught them. But join them and they would show you what happened when that knowledge was used for justice instead of conquest. The choice, as always, was yours.